Imagine waking up in Australia, the so-called lucky country, and realizing your own government reckons your spare bedroom is fair game for a bloody tax bill. Not your car, not your beer fridge in the shed, not even your weekend trip to Bunnings. Nah, they're coming after the dusty old room where you chuck Christmas decorations and your treadmill you never use. This is the cooked reality we're staring down, and mate, if you think this sounds like satire, think again. Jim Chalmers and the mob running Labour are floating the idea of what people are already calling the bedroom tax. And if that doesn't make your blood boil, you're not paying attention. Before we tear apart this bedroom tax madness, where Albo and Chalmers reckon your spare room is their new piggy bank, and the media's too busy yawning to care, smash that like button like you're tearing up a government tax bill. Subscribe if you're sick of being treated like a tenant in your own home. And grab the "Can I vote for a kangaroo?" shirt, links in the description. See, the Labour government has managed to take Australia from being the envy of the world to being flat out broke quicker than a pokies addict with dad's credit card. They've thrown taxpayer money around like confetti at a wedding, except the wedding is our economy, and the confetti is every cent you've worked your guts out for. And now, staring into a financial black hole so big it makes a pothole look like a puddle, they've come up with this genius solution: raid the homes of hardworking Aussies. You own a house with an extra bedroom? Pay up. Want to keep a guest room for your mum when she visits? Cough up. Got an office space so you don't have to work from the kitchen table? Guess what? Labour reckons that's taxable real estate. And this isn't just some wacky thought bubble from a uni student with a Che Guevara poster on their wall. Nah, this is coming from inside the halls of power, dressed up with words like housing efficiency and productivity reforms. But let's cut through the crap. It's a straight-up shakedown. Labor's not calling it the bedroom tax officially, of course, because they know that'd send voters off like a meat pie in a microwave. Instead, they're floating it through think tanks and productivity commissions, waiting to see if we'll swallow it. That's how governments push dodgy ideas. They test the water with fancy buzzwords, and before you know it, you're getting a tax bill for your bloody linen closet. What's even more cooked is that this all comes at the same time as record immigration numbers. Over 1,500 people coming in every single day. Yep, you heard that right. That's a small town's worth of people crammed into Australia every week while we can't even house the mob already here. Housing has gone from a tough market to a full-blown nightmare. Young Aussies are being priced out of suburbs their grandparents could buy into on a single wage. Families are fighting over rentals like it's the last tin of Milo during a panic buy. And Labour's masterstroke to fix it? Not building more homes. Not easing the migration floodgates. Nope. Their solution is to punish you for the house you already worked your guts out to afford. Now here's the real kicker. This scheme isn't going to hit the rich. They'll just pay the tax and keep their mansions. And it won't affect the poor because they don't own property. No, the people in the firing line are middle-class Australians. The ones who scrimped and saved for 2 decades, who went without Bali holidays and new cars just to scrape together a deposit. These are the families who finally got ahead, and now they're being told they've got too much space. Too much space? Mate, since when was owning a decent home in your own bloody country a crime? The arrogance of it all is next level. This isn't just about money, it's ideology. Labour's view is that private property is unfair, that if you've done well, you should be punished so someone else can get a free ride. It's socialism by stealth, plain and simple. They won't admit they've buggered up the economy by spending like drunken sailors, so instead they dress this up as fairness and equity. But let's not kid ourselves. This is daylight robbery disguised as policy. And when Senator Malcolm Roberts asked about this in Parliament, did Labour shut it down? Did they say, "Nah mate, we'd never tax people's bedrooms, that's insane"? Not a chance. They danced around it, dodged, weaved, and spat out more waffle than a dodgy brunch cafe. That's not how you answer if the idea's off the table. That's how you answer when you're seriously considering it but don't want the backlash yet. Think about how dangerous that is. If the government can decide you've got more space than you need and tax you for it, where does it stop? Today, it's bedrooms. Tomorrow it could be your second car, or the extra fridge in the garage, or even how many books you own. Once you accept the principle that the government can decide what's excess, you've already lost. You don't own your stuff anymore, you're just renting it back from the government at whatever price they reckon is fair. And that, my friends, is how free societies slide into authoritarian control. Not with tanks in the streets, but with tax codes, productivity panels, and a never-ending stream of policies designed to squeeze you a little harder every year. The Australia we grew up with, the land of the fair go, where hard work meant you could get ahead, is being eroded one policy at a time. You work, you save, you sacrifice, and instead of a pat on the back, you get a tax bill for having the audacity to own a home with a spare room. But here's where things really get explosive, and trust me, you'll want to stick around for this next bit, because if you thought the bedroom tax was cooked, wait till you hear what else is brewing behind the scenes. Mate, if you thought the so-called bedroom tax was peak insanity, you haven't seen the half of it. Because behind closed doors, the same suits who reckon they know how much living space you're allowed are cooking up even nastier schemes. And the scary part? They're not even hiding it anymore. This government is testing how much we'll cop before we snap, and judging by how quiet most of the media's been, they think they can push us a whole lot further without much of a fight. Take a look at the housing crisis they created. We're pulling in more than 1,500 migrants every single day, and instead of slowing down the intake until we've actually got homes for people to live in, they're doubling down. They're stacking people into already strained cities, jacking up demand while doing bugger all to increase supply. And when Aussies complain they can't buy a place or even find a rental, the response from Labor has basically been, suck it up, build more units, and maybe share your space. Translation? They stuff the market, create chaos, then blame homeowners for not using housing stock efficiently. Efficient use of housing stock? What a load of nonsense. You worked 20 years for your home, and now you're being treated like a squatter in your own country because some academic reckons your spare room could fit a refugee family. And don't get me wrong, Australia has always thrived on immigration. But there's a world of difference between steady, sustainable migration and this out-of-control flood. It's not about race, it's not about culture, it's about maths. You can't bring in a small city every month without building the bloody houses first. Unless, of course, you're planning to solve the crisis by taxing spare bedrooms, rationing space, and telling people they've got to downsize. And that's the dirty little secret, isn't it? It's not incompetence, it's a strategy. They're deliberately engineering a housing squeeze so they can justify more government intervention in private life. And here's another spicy little tidbit most folks don't realize. This bedroom tax isn't just about raising money. It's about data. Yep, every policy like this comes hand in hand with more surveillance. To enforce it, the government would need to know exactly how many bedrooms you've got, who's living in them, and what they're being used for. Think about that for a second. A bureaucrat with a clipboard deciding whether your home office counts as excess space. A drone, or maybe even a property inspector snooping around to make sure you're not cheating the system. This isn't taxation, it's creeping control over how you live. And don't think for a second that this ends with bedrooms. Once you let them through the door, they'll move on to everything else. Already we're seeing whispers about climate levies on home appliances. Imagine paying extra every year because you own an old fridge that isn't energy efficient enough. Or getting slugged with a fee because your car's bigger than some bureaucrat thinks it should be. Today it's your spare room, tomorrow it's your barbecue, your second freezer, your bloody lawnmower. If you reckon that sounds far-fetched, remember, 15 years ago, people laughed at the idea of paying a carbon tax on breathing. And now? We're being lectured daily about our carbon footprint as if the very act of existing is a crime. And speaking of being treated like criminals, let's talk about what's happening in Parliament. When Senator Roberts grilled the government on this bedroom tax, you'd think it would have been a golden opportunity to put the rumour to bed. They could have come out swinging and said, nah, never happening, not in a million years. But they didn't. Instead, they dodged the question like a dodgy tradie who won't return your calls after taking your deposit. More ums, ahs, and waffle than a Year 9 oral presentation. That's not accidental. That's calculated. They want to keep the door open because when the next budget shortfall rolls around, and it will, you better believe this idea will crawl back out of the shadows. Now let's talk politics, because this isn't just about Labor being reckless with your money. This is about the complete collapse of trust in leadership. Anthony Albanese strutted into office promising a fair go, but what did we get? Higher costs of living, more taxes, and a government obsessed with social engineering instead of actually governing. And now with Suzanne Lay as opposition leader, the first woman to hold the role, you'd think she'd be tearing strips off them. But nah, the opposition's been too busy fighting over their own relevance to land a proper blow. And that's how Labour gets away with it. A weak opposition means the government can quietly test policies that would have been political suicide a decade ago. But let's not forget, while all this chaos is playing out in Australia, over in the US, Donald Trump's back in the White House as the 47th president. And love him or hate him, Trump's return is throwing a massive spotlight on the contrast between countries. While America's doubling down on nationalism, border control, and trying to put its own citizens first, here in Australia we've got a government that seems more interested in punishing its citizens for succeeding. Trump's running around talking about bringing manufacturing home, cutting taxes, and bulldozing bureaucracy. Meanwhile, our leaders are floating a policy that punishes you for having a spare room. Tell me that doesn't make us look like clowns on the world stage. And here's where it gets downright terrifying. Once governments get desperate, there's no limit to how far they'll go. This bedroom tax is just the beginning. Think about the precedent it sets. If the government can decide how much living space you need, then they can decide how much food you should buy, how much energy you're allowed to use, how many kids you should have. Don't laugh, it's already happening. Energy rationing is on the table in Europe. In China, the government literally tells couples how many children they're allowed. Do you really think Australia's immune when our leaders are already floating policies straight out of the socialist playbook? What makes it worse is the timing. Aussies are already drowning under the cost of living crisis. Groceries are through the roof, fuel prices are making people cry at the servo, and interest rates have smashed families harder than the GFC ever did. Instead of relief, we get a government that wants to milk us even harder. And all while they keep the migrant intake cranked to 11, knowing full well it's making housing affordability even more of a pipe dream. It's like watching someone pour petrol on a fire, then blaming you for not owning enough buckets. And let's be real, this isn't just economic incompetence, it's cultural arrogance. Labour genuinely believes they know better than you how to live your life. They reckon if you've got a guest room, that space is wasted unless it's being used to house someone they approve of. If you've got savings, you're greedy unless you're redistributing them the way they want. And if you've worked hard to get ahead, you're a problem to be solved, not a success story to celebrate. That's the mindset we're dealing with, a government that sees prosperity not as something to encourage, but something to penalize. And here's the big, dirty question nobody wants to ask. If the government gets away with this, what's next? Do they come for the tradies who keep their utes in the driveway because that's excess vehicle space? Do they slap a tax on families with backyards bigger than a postage stamp because that's inefficient land use? Do they decide your second bathroom's a luxury you shouldn't be allowed to keep without paying extra? Don't laugh. Once the principle's established, it's a free-for-all. The truth is, Australia's being nudged towards a system where you don't actually own anything. Your property rights are conditional, subject to the government's financial desperation and ideological whims. Today, it's spare rooms. Tomorrow it could be anything they decide you don't deserve. And if you don't think that's possible, you haven't been paying attention to how fast freedoms vanish when people stop fighting for them. And that's the cliff we're standing on right now. The bedroom tax is the tip of the iceberg, and beneath the surface, there's a whole agenda waiting to surface. And mate, the next part of this story is even more explosive, because it's not just about bedrooms, it's about the future of every single Aussie household. And here's the bit nobody wants to admit out loud. The bedroom tax is just the training wheels. Once you swallow that, the whole machine opens up. Suddenly, the government has a moral license to look into your lounge room and say, "Oi, you've got too much of this, not enough of that, and guess what, mate, we're going to tax the difference." It's not even about revenue anymore. It's about control. The money they scrape out of your spare room won't even dent the trillion-dollar debt hole they've dug. But what it will do is set a precedent that your private property isn't really yours. You're just renting life itself from the government, and the price tag gets jacked up whenever they're short on cash. And that's the bloody terrifying part, because history tells us where this road goes. It doesn't go towards fairness, it doesn't go towards equality, it goes towards dependency. Once the government controls how you live, what you own, and how you use it, they own you. You think you're free because you've got a mortgage and a patch of dirt in the suburbs, but what happens when every inch of it is subject to arbitrary efficiency taxes? That's not freedom, that's feudalism dressed up with a slick PR campaign. You don't own your castle anymore, you're just a tenant in a government-run fiefdom. And don't think the timing's a coincidence. While Aussies are being smashed with rising costs, while small businesses are shutting their doors, while families are barely scraping through the week, this mob sees an opportunity. People are so desperate they'll cop anything, as long as it doesn't make life worse right now. So Labour floats their dodgiest ideas during a crisis, hoping the chaos will drown out the outrage. And if you think they won't try it, just remember how many times in the last few years we were told, it's just temporary. Mate, nothing is more permanent than a temporary government tax. Now let's zoom out, because this isn't just about economics. It's cultural warfare. For decades, the Aussie dream was simple: own a home, have a backyard, crack a cold one at the end of the day, and know you built something real. That's what our parents and grandparents fought for. But under this government, that dream is being painted as selfish, outdated, and greedy. You're not a hard-working Aussie anymore, you're a hoarder of space, a blocker of equity, an obstacle to the government's grand social experiment. They're rewriting the national identity to suit their ideology, and if you don't fit, you'll be punished until you do. And here's the kicker, they're banking on us rolling over. They reckon Aussies have gone soft, too distracted by TikTok trends and footy scores to care about their freedoms being nicked one slice at a time. They think we'll shrug and say, "She'll be right, mate," while they hollow out the foundations of the fair go. But I'll tell you what, they're underestimating us. Aussies might be laid back, but we're not stupid. We know when we're being ripped off, and we know when the line's been crossed. The bedroom tax isn't just another dumb policy idea. It's a litmus test. If they can get away with taxing your spare room, they can get away with bloody anything. And let's not pretend the media's on our side here. Most of them are in the government's pocket, too busy running cover stories about climate virtue signaling and celebrity scandals to actually dig into what's happening in Parliament. The same talking heads who called you a conspiracy theorist for questioning lockdowns are now parroting the line that maybe this isn't such a bad idea. Because for them, it's all theory. They don't live in the real world where families are choosing between paying the mortgage or filling up the tank. They live in million-dollar terraces and inner-city units, sipping soy lattes while writing opinion pieces about intergenerational fairness. Fairness? Try telling that to a single mum in Western Sydney who's about to get slugged for giving her kids separate bedrooms. But here's the hopeful bit. And yeah, I know, hope's hard to come by lately. There's still time to fight this. This whole thing is still being floated, tested, probed. That means backlash matters. Noise matters. Outrage matters. Governments only pull back when they think their political skin's on the line. If Aussies unite and say, "No bloody way are you taxing our homes," then Labour will scuttle back into the shadows and pretend it never happened. That's how we kill this idea before it grows legs. And let me tell you, if there was ever a time to draw the line in the sand, this is it. Because if we don't, what's next? You reckon your backyard chook shed is safe? Your fishing boat? Your caravan out the back? Don't be naive. Once the principle is accepted, everything's up for grabs. The government will treat every aspect of your life as a potential revenue stream. And by the time you realize how much they've taken, it'll be too late to get it back. So here's the choice in front of us. Do we accept a future where the government decides how much life we're allowed to live? Or do we stand up and remind them this is our country, our homes, our bloody bedrooms? We've got to reject this nonsense outright, because the day you start paying tax on your spare room is the day you stop being a free Aussie and start being a tenant in your own life. And I don't know about you, but that's a future I'm not willing to accept. See you in the next one, and don't forget to slap that like button like it just sold off your local hospital to pay for another overseas junket. Oi, and if you're really fired up, grab the "Can I vote for a kangaroo" shirt, wear it to the next rate hike meeting, the next protest, or just your local cafe when you're forking out $9 for a flat white while wondering why your tax dollars are fixing someone else's country instead of ours. Stay loud, stay awake, and never stop fighting for the Australia we bloody deserve.